Hey, so I wanted to do a video on climate change. Um, Sorry, I banged my face against the wall. It's not a pimple, but whatever, who cares if it was. Um, just a small cut. Uh, yeah, so anyways, you know, I spent most of my life with that as my kind of my primary issue, I would say. When I was a little kid, I used to have these nightmares about lumberjacks cutting down trees. And one of my first jobs was for Connecticut Public Interest Research Group. And it wasn't just because they would hire anybody. I cared. They didn't want me because I didn't really get money, but I I wanted to uh, do that. And I've basically continued my advocacy um, as my political as not aspiration, but my political motivation, all for most of my life. Um, so I kind of lost hope, I would say, before Trump became president. I was looking at some atmospheric methane chart. And the reason, obviously, when Trump became president, a lot of that information on climate change uh, was taken offline. So they deleted it or they altered it um, when Trump had that power. I don't know if it's back or if it's accurate or anything. But at the time, I trusted the online data I was getting. Uh, and the methane chart scared me as far as what I was seeing. I didn't believe it was correlated at all with the industry. I thought it was what I was seeing was a feedback loop um, that was happening because of rising temperatures, releasing stores of methane from the ocean, releasing stores of methane from permafrost, etc., etc. And that feedback loop is one of the most powerful um, per molecule that I'm aware of uh, naturally occurring. Relevant of relevant volume. Um, the number one probably punch you in the face greenhouse gas is water vapor. But can't do much about that. Uh, and the volume is so huge. Yeah, what do you? The warmer air holds more moisture. It's mm, Moist air holds more heat. um, but methane is a little bit more um energy dense and I don't want to say controllable, but it's conceivable that humanity could grab methane and hold it to the ground. We're not doing that with water vapor. So at different times, I've thought about methyl hydrates as an energy source. So the basic idea is that you want to use as much of the methane as possible before it gets up in the atmosphere, where it's like the number one transporter of water vapor to the upper atmosphere, which is like a whole other issue. Um, but it's an extremely potent greenhouse gas that then degrades into CO2. So you're better off burning it and getting some useful energy from it rather than letting it go up there, decay on its own, and become CO2 on its own. It's better, trust me. So I was a very big advocate of methane as a natural gas as a power source, for that reason, because I believed sincerely that using methane, even though it's not ideal, from a true geoengineering perspective, I'd rather decay it in a furnace down here than have it decay up there. So then the question becomes, well, what's the rate of release? Because if you're using it and it wouldn't have been released anyway, then um, you're contributing. But the fact is, it's lighter than air, and the ground's shaking, and the water is warming, and the ice is melting, and it's gonna go up. It's the methane is gonna go up, and when it does, it's gonna get real hot real fast. So for that reason, I was all about fracking. I was all about technology for extracting and using methane from whatever source we can as our primary fuel source. No, that kind of went out the window. I lost all hope. But I saw a video, and I recognize the fact that other people might know more. Well, do know, not might, do. It's not a question. It's definite. Know more than me on the topic of climate change and the rational steps required to mitigate it and the reasonable expected consequences. So a lot of the beliefs I have are based on a solid foundation in thermodynamics and science, and obviously professionally, um, but also not hard numbers, not like a true understanding of the volumes and the energies we're talking about. I'm kind of taking what I know about what goes on in a very small space and trying to apply that knowledge to atmospheric science, which is um, why I do it recreationally, and nobody pays me for it because it's not an accurate way to do it. But I do feel that I have a better understanding than the layperson. When I saw that chart, I didn't see it like basically like a hockey stick. As far as it's not huge numbers, but it's the rate of increase that I found concerning. So, basically, the best possible answer to managing the gases in our atmosphere is to literally manage the gases in our atmosphere. And methane is a big part of that. If we can use methane as an energy source, it's pretty much, in my opinion, superior to any synthetic fuel that is going to be in a closed loop. And that might sound crazy to some people, but when you consider the fact that it's a natural resource that's going to end up in the atmosphere if we don't use it, the idea of making something new seems like an added, not a subtracted. And I'm trying to subtract gas from the future atmosphere. So it wasn't superior to natural gas, in my opinion, for mitigating long-term climate change. Maybe short-term, and maybe I might be wrong because, again, it depends on how much and how quickly the natural gas will be released into the atmosphere from the Earth, and how much of that we could reasonably be expected to grab beforehand. And it's even more complicated than that. But what I kind of at the time conceptualized as the best possible solution was, look at it like a military would look at it. What's the threat that is the most imminent? So the threat that's the most imminent is the methane that is in the water. Well, it's both going to be under the permafrost and under the water. And under the permafrost, it's because a slight crack or a spot melts or something like that, and you can lose a whole section. Because it'll find its way for miles, maybe, to that one breach in the permafrost and vent out. So that would be a fracking solution or just a drilling solution. I'm pretty sure Russia's all over that. They probably drill a hole, get natural gas, but it's such a big country, it's impossible to expect them to do much. But I'm sure that's great by me. You hear about Russians drilling for natural gas, and I'm like, well, it warms my heart, because it's a good thing, in my opinion, for the environment, as crazy as that sounds. Now, is it really, like, technically? It really depends on the rate of leaks and how much they're burning and waste and what that energy is even being used for. If you're making all this energy and using it to build, tanks and ovens and toy crap, um not that kids don't, you get my point. If it's not going to feed a machine that is carbon negative in nature, it's counterproductive ultimately anyway. So you have to engineer a system that's carbon negative, and then you have to feed that system with energy that is long term carbon neutral-ish, or greenhouse neutral-ish. So that was the idea. Now, like I said, I lost hope, so it wasn't like a thing, but what I envisioned was the fracking in Siberia, which is already being done. It has nothing to do with anything I would ever influence. It's just a a a source of greenhouse gases that I believe is capturable, that is a imminent risk of being released anyway. So I would consider it like a top priority to get it, capture it, store it, before it's vented into the atmosphere, where it becomes a greenhouse gas and a lost resource, right? So it's a twofer. And then the sea, the ocean, right? So there's tons of methane stored in the water, both liquid and solid, as ice and methyl hydrates. And the problem is extracting it and the economics of that. And it's just, a lot of it is the logistics of working offshore versus how much energy you're going to capture and just the economics of it. But I saw a video today, and it gives me hope because, again, people out there are a lot smarter than me. So the fact that they haven't lost hope maybe gives me hope, because if they're smarter than me and they're still working, then maybe it's not as hopeless as I imagined it. Um, anyway, I'm going to share the video. I thought it was pretty cool that it's still happening and people still care and all that. Not just about COVID and politics, because this is really important. Energy, it's not a joke. And I know everybody's like, oil and the government will handle it. They won't. They don't. I know they do. It's what they do. It's a big part of their foreign policy. Um, but I don't know if they're worried about my kids like they pretend to be, because when I look at that energy policy, I see a suicide mission. And I don't think they know more than me on that. Like, I know some people know more than me, but when I hear them try to justify it, it sounds like they're just really threatening me. I don't hear anything rational or logical. I just hear like vague threats or direct threats or implied threats. And that's really like, it's insufficient to ease my concerns. So when I see videos like this, I get a little bit less anxious, because I think, like, holy crap, these people are smart and they're not like on a suicide tear. It's like they're working. So maybe it's not as hopeless as I thought.